All right, well, here we go. This is the System Failure Podcast, number 73.
Hey, Brian, it is number 73, and it is the dead of winter out there. Hey, I was at hockey this past Thursday, and I remember coming out of the rink and thinking to myself, there'd been like a crazy cold snap on, maybe 5 degrees below zero, something like that. Which is about 15 degrees Celsius for our revered system failure listeners who don't work with freedom units and who live in one of these other countries that uses the eminently sensible Celsius scale of temperature measurement and not our bizarre Fahrenheit scale. Which, by the way, a little aside, we all know that the Fahrenheit scale is based on magic numbers, right? I mean, you know this, right, Brian? I must have mentioned it on this podcast before. But in case I didn't, the transition from 32 to 33 is extremely significant in the world of magic numbers, right?
Well, doesn't that make our system superior than to Celsius? I mean, that's not magic.
Okay, well, you're right. It all comes from the 360 degrees of a circle, right? We all understand that the signs of the zodiacs are the zodiac is the belt of constellations that appears, just above the equator from Earth. So it's like we live on this ball, and then in a belt around the equator of this ball, there's this big, huge, and it's like a theater screen. We're standing on the surface of the Earth on the equator, looking straight up, and there, that belt, like one of those 360-degree rotunda theater screens, is what the signs of the zodiac are. So you're imagining this. It's like a cylinder with no top and no bottom, right? You've got this round. You've got this round screen you're standing in the middle of, and of course the screen is whacked up into 12 zodiac signs, just like the clock is whacked up into 12 hours, and each hour is whacked up into 60 minutes, and each minute is divided up into 60 seconds. So there you got your 12, your 60, and your 60. And if you take your 360 degrees that comprise the full arc of a circle and you whack it up into 12 zodiac signs, you get 30 degrees for each sign. So each sign of the zodiac is said to represent 30 degrees of the elliptical, of the circle that comprises the zodiac signs. And, it's just there's a little bit of it's up to interpretation, exactly when you are looking at, say, Cancer, and then where's the border between Cancer and Sagittarius? Well, it's a little bit, you're talking about two clusters of stars, so exactly where the border is a little hazy. And for that reason, there's always a little neutral zone between the 12 signs of the zodiac, a 3-degree neutral zone. And so that's why when there's a great changing of the signs, like the going out of the age of Pisces and the coming in of the age of Aquarius, there's always a 3-degree neutral zone. And so that's why whenever the sun is set to rise in a new house on the morning of the vernal equinox. That's how we determine what the age is, right? There's the great year, the 20,000 year period, or 24,000 year period. Sorry, what is it? 48,000 year period, where I don't know if I'm doing my math right, but it's 2,000 year period. So that's 240,000 years, the great year. Where because the Earth rotates on its axis, and it also rotates around the sun, but the axis about which the Earth rotates is slightly off kilter. That creates our ball is wobbling while it spins, and that creates this great year where the place where the zodiac sign in which the sun appears to rise on the vernal equinox, the first day of spring every year, is said to be the house that the sun god is residing in for that 2,000-year period, right? So we've just the 0 AD to approximately 200 AD is said to be the age of Pisces, and also coincidental with the dispensation of Jesus, and this is why the Pisces fish always symbolizes Christianity, and why Christians are wont to drive around town with a Pisces fish slapped on the back of their car. And the sun gods are always said to declare their mission when they turn age 30, and they're always said to be crucified when they turn age 33, right? That's the transition between the great dispensations, right? Prior to Jesus' age of Pisces, we had Moses' age of the ram, and as mentioned, we're headed into the age of Aquarius. And so the transition from 32 to 33 is highly significant in the astronomical allegory that makes up all of our religions, and that's why water is a solid at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but transitions into water at age 33. So all that is a long way of saying that that it was 5 degrees, that it was about, on Thursday, it was about 5 degrees above zero, and it felt like it was That's 15 below in Celsius and 5 degrees above in Fahrenheit. In traveling internationally, the best way to switch between Fahrenheit and Celsius, I have found, is this nifty little trick involving another fun number, 28. It just happens to be that 28 degrees Fahrenheit is equal to, 82 degrees Fahrenheit is equal to 28 degrees Celsius. So you just switch the 8 and the 2, and that gives you a good feeling. So if it's 28 degrees Celsius, it's a pretty nice summer day, right? The Celsius works with between 0, water freezes at 0, and then water boils at 100 Celsius versus 32 and 212. So you're right, Brian. No magical numerology to be found in the Celsius scale, but it just works and is simple. Anyhow, I got off the ice at hockey. I left the arena. I remember thinking, wow, maybe it's warming up out because maybe the cold snap has finally passed, because I remember feeling like it was warm and not frigid out. Like it didn't, the cold didn't have that bite that it had. I got in the car and turned it on, and it was 8 degrees out, and I was thinking it was like 25 or something. So that's how I know my body's really acclimated to the frigid winter. So how are you holding up this winter, Brian?
All right. It is exciting times at hockey when it's warmer inside the rink than outside. So like in England, they use like miles, right? They have and so do they use like Fahrenheit there also?
They don't. They've got a weird hybrid system. I can scarcely keep track of those Brits. They also joined the EU for a time until the famous Brexit in 2016, but they still used pounds and not the euro primarily there. So it's very strange. The Brits are the reason when we talk about the imperial system of measurements, the empire we're talking about is, of course, the British Empire, but they switched over to kilometers some time ago.
So is the United States like literally the only place that uses Fahrenheit?
I said kilometers. I meant degrees Celsius. I think they still use miles in Merry England. I can't remember. There are a couple of countries like the Republic of Palau, a tiny nation in the Pacific Ocean. There's one other one too. It might be like North Korea or one of these crazy countries, I think, still uses an imperial system of measurement too, but I can't remember. I surely should have looked it up if I'd known it would come up.
Like, how does that decision get made? Did our Masonic elders, because I guess like George Washington and all were Masonic people, and they just decided that we're gonna have this other system? And where did they get the idea to have this system?
That's a great question. I do know that in the 70s and 80s there was a big push to get America on the metric system, but it failed because we just so love our freedom units. We can't bear to countenance the transition, I guess. But that's a great question. That's something I should definitely look into. I wonder who it is behind the curtains of power that's making these decisions about which unit of measurements we're all going to be, which conventions of measurement we're all going to be using. So, great question. Haven't got an answer for you, Brian.
All right. Well, I guess we are just some kind of Masonic prophetic realization going on here in the good old US of A.
Well, at least the powers that be have lots of plans for us that we don't know about, eh?
Yeah.
Well, I've been pouring it on these past few weeks. So there's this movie. It's like this, middlebrow made-for-TV movie on Amazon called The Man Who Invented Christmas. It has Christopher Plummer, though, who I really like. You may recall the Shakespearean actor Christopher Plummer. My favorite role of his is he played Admiral Chang on Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, a movie I was deprived of seeing in theaters, as you may recall, because we had to see Beauty and the Beast for Brian's birthday in 1991.
Unfortunately, I don't even remember seeing Beauty and the Beast in theaters.
We went to the Clark's Pond Cinema. The Hoyt Cinema, not Clark's Pond, up in Auburn, Maine. This was in 1991. The Soviet Union had recently collapsed, and this new Star Trek movie was out with a parable about the new alliance between the Klingon Empire and the Federation, and I was desperate to see it, and I would have stepped over my own mother to get a ticket to see Star Wars 6, but I had to, like a prisoner, be marched past the Star Wars 6 theater and on down the hall to the kiddie theater to see Beauty and the Beast, because it's Brian's birthday, we all got to celebrate together. So I've long since forgiven you. You'll be relieved to learn for this outrage, Brian.
Beauty and the Beast, that's like a Disney movie for girls. Like if it was The Lion King, that would be one thing.
Lion King is good. I thought Beauty and the Beast was pretty good, even at the time. It was no Star Trek 6. And I also was a prisoner forced to see Pocahontas a couple of years later, also on your birthday.
I remember seeing Pocahontas. Yeah. But, well, these old, timey, like that's like when Disney was still making like real movies as opposed to like this Mufasa remake or
right, yeah,
these CGI.
There's a bit of an asterisk in that the story of The Lion King is, the Hamlet redux. So it's not like it's this new, but it is like, I feel like The Lion King was a good balance of recognizable, like we all know the story of Hamlet, like it's recognizable, but it's not just a copy, right? All art has to be a little bit derivative, or it would be completely nonsensical. Like art has to be it has to refer to something, but it has to be a new take on that something. It's like the difference I always point out between Michelangelo's David and the many replicas of the David you can buy in the gift shop, right? That one is actual art and the other is just a copy to make money. And that's how I feel about the relationship between Mufasa, the movie, and the Lion King of 1993 or 2. When did that movie come out? 93? I feel like it was Aladdin and then the Lion King, right? So it must have been 94. Oh man, I can't remember. It's like the Little Mermaid, the Lion King. Right, that's the order I remember, right? And then the Lion King, Aladdin, and then I'm screwing up. The Little Mermaid, then Aladdin, then the Lion King. That's the order I remember. We'd have to look it up to find out if that's actually the sequence of this movies came out.
I mean, it seems like that some of those movies at least have some artistic integrity, and now Disney just makes these soulless CGI remakes of the movies that we grew up with in the 90s, and it's just sad that that's where we're at artistically, although that's part of maybe why we're circling the drain.
Well, it's part of becoming an international conglomerate, right? The talent, you just get the bigger your company gets and the more it's run by suits and accountants, the less of a position they are in to take any risks. All they can do is repeat what was demonstrated to work in the 90s. And, I mean, it made a lot of money. At least the Marvel franchises have made a lot of money for themselves, and the Star Wars and franchises, they must have printed a lot of money. But, I mean, they have destroyed those franchises. No one wants to watch a Marvel or a Star Wars movie anymore.
Well, to be fair, I don't really think we're circling the drain. It's just we're circling the drain if you try to watch these Disney movies or go on Reddit for that matter.
We have a crisis of artistic representation. And I remember you talking about that on System Failure Podcast number 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a callback.
Yeah. Well, I've been going balls to the walls here for the last week or two. I completely revamped in addition to obviously establishing systemfailure.org as our custom domain. I also have gone through and revamped the graphics that go out with the weekly emails, and I also wrote up my first ever members only section that'll go out with Monday's weekly email. So it's like if you subscribe to the podcast, then the email will be longer and there'll be more text about the things I've been doing this week and a little more informal things about the news. Some of the things I'll be talking about on the podcast this very day, as a matter of fact.
So we have exclusive members only content is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. And I thought it was better to add to the weekly rather than have a second weekly email that goes out on Thursdays. We have 2 podcasts here. Obviously, we've got our flagship, which we're recording for our venerable System Failure listeners to be released Monday. And then we have our quickie where I read that week's essay on Thursday. And I thought maybe I'd have 2 essays too to reflect the 2 podcasts. But I think people want as few ticklers in their email inbox as possible, right? Wouldn't we all like to get fewer emails? So I thought, well, since I can get away with a line and then have that below that line be invisible to free subscribers and visible only to paid subscribers, why not make it 1 email instead of 2? What are your thoughts on First Blush, Brian? It seemed like if you're a free subscriber, I should upgrade you to paid since you're like a creator. That seems silly. But what do you think? Would you rather receive 2 shorter emails or 1 longer one?
I'm inclined to say 1 email does seem better.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I revamped the graphics. I now have a chart that's the email banner header is now the chart that shows where we're at in the system failure constellation of ideas, which is great. I added a little graphic with a post-it note to remind people. Usually that post-it note will remind people to check out the podcast on Spotify or where they normally listen. And it also entreats our intrepid system failure listeners to head over to systemfailure.org, but this week it's going to remind our 7 paid subscribers that they have bonus content available, below the further materials section of this week's email. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, God bless all 7 of them.
Yeah, they're going to be a lot more of them sooner rather than later. But this has really I have finally, and I think everyone probably reaches this point at some point in their lives. I have finally reached the point where I have too much work to do and not enough time, which is a great problem to have. The opposite is the worst, where you've got nothing to do and tons of time to fill up. That's where you really, they say idleness is the devil's hands, and it's definitely true. But I've gotten to the point where I just have way too much work and not enough time to do it, and I'm trying to figure out how I can do more work in my limited hours. So that's the problem I'm confronted with. And I was amused by a movie I watched with the lovely Tracy the Wise over the holiday break, and that movie is called The Man Who Invented Christmas. It's this made-for-TV film. I may have already mentioned
Chris Plummer.
With Chris Plummer, yeah, okay, right, yeah. So this movie it's about Charles Dickens writing a Christmas Carol. It's just an excuse for them to retell the story of A Christmas Carol again. But the movie is funny because Charles Dickens in real life had 10 kids, also cravenly abandoned his wife at some point, which is for another podcast. But the point is he had 10 kids in one hell of a chaotic family. Do you remember the High Sparrow from Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that man plays the father of Charles Dickens, who also comes to join the household, introducing even more chaos. So it's a lot of hijinks where Charles Dickens has to write this story, and he's got this study where he writes it in. And obviously Christopher Plummer plays the Scrooge of Dickens's mind, and they have a whole thing about how the man came up with the story. But the point, his housekeeper, Mrs. Fisk, or his family, keeps knocking on his door repeatedly. It becomes like a repeated gag, and he yanks the door open. He's like, "Mrs. Fisk, I have told you repeatedly that I am not to be disturbed." But of course, every time there's always some reason why he has to be disturbed, and the man just cannot seem to put pen to paper without his household kicking the door open and bugging him. At some point, his father's like, "Well, we must not disturb the master when he's in his divine frenzy." Being a reference to Plato's frenzies there. So anyway, very funny, and that's exactly how I feel. I feel like the beleaguered Charles Dickens. It's like it's like writing is like juggling. You've got all these balls in the air, and even the slightest interruption will cause all those balls to fall to the floor and roll off onto the cupboards, and then the innocent person who's just wanted to ask you an innocent question leaves, and they have no idea that now you're looking under all the furniture. You get all the balls back and get them all back and play again. It sets you back 15, 20 minutes, like every time. And so obviously you can't be an ogre that just screams at your family. No one wishes that they avoided their family to do work when they're on their deathbed, right? So you have to continually access a reserve of patience, and I guess patience really is the fundamental virtue of the writer, as I'm finding out. So that's all been very amusing. I wonder if you've ever had that experience, Brian. Have you ever had way too much to do and not enough time to do it in?
No.
All right. Well, I hope that someday soon you have that problem. I know you've gotten jammed up having to edit this podcast before. We're just like, you have like it's like someone's birthday. We've got all these things we got to do, and then like the podcast needs to come out, and you're like, ugh, I know you've gotten jammed up a little bit, hey?
Well, I have a rather busy schedule.
Yeah.
But people don't like knock on my door when I'm trying to work for the most part. In any case, though, doing what's hard, though, is important, yeah. And if it was easy, everyone would do it.
Well, the completion of the great work is the focus of the alchemical tradition, the magnum opus. Always has been, right? The idea is that what the interface should feel like is that your life should be focused on this great work. That's left quite ambiguous, but that's how I feel about the Substack writings and the System Failure podcast and all this good stuff we're working on. Well, Brian, by way of an abrupt change of subject, I wonder if you have chanced to visit our favorite social media site, Reddit, this week.
I have.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is in one sad state. So, I suppose the preamble here, but I just want to rewind the clock to 2016. I remember driving to my job the morning after the 2016 election. I remember the Bruins had won handily the night before, too. Well, not handily, in overtime the night before, but that's neither here nor there. What matters is that I was in my car listening to my beloved NPR the day after the 2016 election. Now, I'd been harboring hopes that the Donald would win the 2016 election because I was so upset over the sandbagging of my favored candidate, Mr. Bernie Sanders. Now, I voted for Jill Stein, the crazy cat lady, but in my heart of hearts, I was hoping that Hillary would suffer a defeat because I was so angry over what had happened in the 2016 primaries. But then in my car on the way to work, I was like, have I badly miscalculated the situation? If even NPR is reporting that Donald Trump may in fact be an agent of Moscow, then maybe I really have miscalculated. Maybe my finger is off the pulse here. But we all know how the story turned out, right? The Mueller investigation came and went and turned up nothing. And in 2025, the Donald, this past Monday, got sworn in again as the president again. And there's not a word on NPR.org about the White House being taken over by an agent of foreign power. because no one believes that anymore. The narrative is like totally discredited. If NPR believed that the Donald was indeed an agent of Moscow, then obviously him taking the Oval Office again would be the biggest story of this century, even bigger than 2016. But there's no peep because no one actually believes it, because it was a propaganda line. Just like the war in Iraq that NPR got busted cheerleading for and just uncritically parroting propaganda talking points from the government for. I remember in the 2000s and the aughts, during the 2000s, not the aughts, during the 2000s, I remember we all had to say, yeah, NPR sure called that one wrong. But we all dusted ourselves off, or at least I did, and kept listening to NPR for another 10 years until they finally made one too many compromises with power in the aftermath of the 2016 election. And so all that leads me to Reddit of this week, where this idea that the Donald is, we no longer talk about him being an agent of Moscow. Now he's the second coming of Hitler, right? That is the next, the new version of the story that everyone's banging on about. And it's obviously no more true than the Russiagate business. But Reddit, like the prevailing view among the public relations or the public opinion shaping bots and the misbegotten genuine accounts on Reddit, the consensus is that, yes, Hitler is in fact taking the White House once again. And, just like Russiagate, actual evidence that this is true is really skinny. I mean, the pieces of evidence are so few and far between that any single thing we could possibly seize upon to confirm that narrative, there's this weird tension between the prevailing view on Reddit and the actual election outcomes the first week in November. And there really hasn't been any avenue or channel for that tension to be resolved through until this past week, when there was a picture of Elon Musk, with his arm in the air in a way that looked unfortunately reminiscent of the old Sieg Heil Nazi salutes of the 1930s Germany. And the discourse level on Reddit all but collapsed in the face of this image or collection of images. What did you notice, Brian?
Well, they're trying to get everyone to ban the links to Twitter now, and it is it's hard to believe that this is the narrative. I mean, it seems like that the Trump is Hitler narrative sort of cost the Dems the 2024 election.
Oh, absolutely.
But I guess it's when it's the only play in your playbook. What choice do you have?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, the r/Maine, the Maine board for our state of Maine, was one of the notable example. A bunch of posts demanding the banning of X or Twitter links in the aftermath of Elon's image. And then when the mods were like, well, we're not going to ban X links because of a lot of the state's communications with its citizens comes via X, then the accusations of the mods being Nazis was flooding the account. Was flooding the board, I mean to say. And I guess for me, much like with NPR, I have to demand, there just has to be a certain level of intellectual, intelligence for me to interact any further. And post after post after post about this was enough for me to, much like NPR, decide that I'm gonna, wash my hands clean of Reddit and move on with my life. They just two things. First of all, the standard of the intellectual standard just has to be, the bar just has to be at a certain level. Below that, it's useless. And the other issue is that Reddit is chiefly and fundamentally an aggregator site where news from across the internet is aggregated. That's how Reddit became big. And so if it's, in addition to X and Twitter, links to Meta's various platforms have also been broadly banned now across Reddit, making Reddit nothing but an echo chamber with no means of entree or egress from other social media sites. So it's just becoming siloed into its own echo chamber. And so, I just love the Reddit format where the things are grouped by topic versus grouped by author. And then where the comments are actually relevant to the article versus on X where it's nothing but ads to go on some chick's OnlyFans page in the comments and not at all comments relevant to the actual discussion. So I will miss it. I really like I love the reading of text versus the short form video format. So I am lost and homeless now. No idea where to go, but yeah, the main subreddit is a prime example. It's just trashed and unusable. You just can't interact with it. It's over.
The state of Maine was what we're talking about there.
Yeah, the state of Maine subreddit.
Yeah, I think Well, it just doesn't really, I think, reflect reality. I imagine people, I don't know, are people who voted for like Kamala, they see Elon do, a Sieg Heil, and they're like, I knew it. He was Hitler all along. Is that like what anyone's reaction is?
If that's your reaction, then that's fine. But I just don't want to read any comments by. I just need to go somewhere else with this higher higher level comments than that. It's just not. Look, I mean, obviously, American culture as it exists today, like the confrontation with Hitler in World War II is our foundation myth. It's how we understand ourselves as people. And calling someone a Nazi is the worst thing you can possibly call them. That's why the desperate news media is going that route, right? They're just going to burn all their powder and just leave it all on the table, right? They're desperate. Their viewership has collapsed because they made compromises with power. Their viewership has collapsed, and so the only way for them to exist is to continue making those compromises with power and try to pull one over on the last few sorry souls who still pay attention to the corporate media. And Reddit becoming that way too.
Well, they weren't like talking about this Sieg Heil like on NPR.com. I was like trying to see if, like, I don't see any like serious news source trying to portray this as
obviously
like a legitimate
not, right?
thing.
Like NPR already blew themselves up doing this 8 years ago.
Yeah, so it seems to be like a mostly made up thing, and I don't know. Yeah, people are going to engage in censorship to try to prevent, Nazism, which is like censorship or an oppression, basically. So, I agree. I think we just got to stop going on Reddit. Maybe it was never that good to begin with, or I mean, the idea seems sound, but like spending your time like on this app and draining your hours away, like upvoting like rage faces and whatnot.
Reddit was a great source of information. The upvote downvote system made it fast, and the highest quality information would rise to the top. But you're right, it's degraded over time.
I don't know if we like need. I just don't know if we like need this. Like, I don't know what like great things. I mean, it's cool like if like for following like a sports team, there's like good information in there, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, there was. Now Twitter links are all banned, so you won't be getting that information anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it's time to just let this go. Like we don't need, social media doesn't make you a happier person, and there's no better indication than what's going down. So really, it's for the best. But I just can't imagine that this is like a good move. Like Reddit's like a public company now, or at least they're trying to make money, right?
Yeah, and their stock's doing really well.
Is it?
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, they had to embrace like a certain amount of censorship or something to like court sponsors, so they had to like get things like in line and not have it be too 4chan-esque. So I guess, I don't know, some of their moves make sense in light of that, but I just can't imagine. You'd have to be like a depraved lunatic to be going on Reddit at this point, right? Or I don't know. It's so crazy. There's the business to call everyone like a Nazi. Just like, I don't know. It's so played out that I can't believe that they're just going to trot this play out again. It's hard to fathom.
It's really, really shameless. Well, if I'd thought to prep it before the show, you mentioned a few weeks ago that I always am mentioning the movie Titanic, and I think that this is a good moment to make a reference. There's obviously the scene in Titanic where the band plays on even as the ship disappears beneath them, and you can hear the strains of "Nearer My God to Thee" as the quartet, finishes their last song, and then like one of them turns to the rest of them and says, "Gentlemen, it's been a privilege playing with you this evening." And then they instead of turning to leave, and then he continues to play his instrument instead of heading for the lifeboats, and the other three members of the quartet see what he's doing, turn around, and forfeit any chance of salvation to try to play for the crowd as the men carry out their quintessential duty in the final moments of their lives. And that's how I feel about Reddit. I wished I'd queued up the music, Brian, to play "Nearer My God to Thee" as a salute to my favorite website, Low, these past 10 to 15 years. But it's over for yours truly. That is just utterly pathetic. I mean, we have got to. That is just so unhelpful for the dialogue, the discourse nationally, to go round and round and round about Elon's gesture, like as if this is how it would be. As if this is what it would look like if Nazis were taking over the White House. So, it's too bad, but like you're saying, it was a long time coming. My attention span, I'm sure, will be all the better for it, eh?
Well, it's just this contagion, man, like wherein people, you just, like, you can't really like challenge the ideas. You just have to like accept them and go along. And it's not a good discourse. And it's not one anyone. I don't know. I don't know who these people are. Who I think it must be mostly made up, right? It's like astroturfing. I don't like. Are all these people coming out of the woodwork to try to get the state of Maine subreddit there people to ban Twitter links? Are these like real? Are these real people?
I'm sure it's some kind of an unholy alliance between like Share Blue, David Brock, public opinion bots, and the not so discerning who have real people who have actual Reddit accounts.
Well, once you get a few dominoes to fall, then you get other people just bandwagoning on, and it just seems unnatural. Is what it is.
I feel like I may have badmouthed the people who believe some of this propaganda. But I do think we got to cut, just as a word of defense for folks who are genuinely concerned about like the rise of the Donald, the second rise, the phoenix rising from the ashes here. That is the Donald. I can understand where it would be extremely concerning when previously credible news outlets assure you that Hitler is taking power in Washington D.C. We got to cut people a little bit of slack for like believing these things from credible news outlets. It gave me pause in 2016 with the Russiagate business, so it's not like I'm immune.
Well, I guess I'll just trip on my own sword and say it here, but like a Sieg Heil is not really what made the Nazis, right?
Obviously, yes, obviously not.
And so, it's some kind of spirited gesture. If he was like goose-stepping around the stage and saying Heil Hitler or something, I guess that would be concerning. But I'll be concerned when they start trying to like round up Jews or put people in camps. I guess they're rounding up immigrants. I guess is what you would say if you were
rounding up people who are. Look, I'm generally a pro-immigration person, with the caveat that there are going to be economic reasons why we can't have unlimited immigration. But like having the government interdict people who have broken actual federal laws, you really could not call that a descent into Nazism. It would be tough to stretch. We're going to actually enforce some of the laws that are already on our books. It'd be tough to work that into evidence that the Fourth Reich is at hand here.
Yeah, I think we obviously like reasonable immigration policy. I don't know why we don't have that, and like why we have to have all these illegals in the first place. Well, I don't know why we advance the drug policies that we do, but I guess I do know why.
Yeah, there's some corporate dollars. Having millions of illegal people in the country makes some corporations a lot of money. That's why we've got them. And it's also a great cudgel to keep the wages down for the naturalized middle class and lower class who work here. The more poor, desperate workers you have, the more profitable all the companies are. It's a simple fact. There's a huge financial incentive to keep people in a desperate state. The propaganda pamphlet for capitalism says, well, it's freedom. If you don't like your job, you're free to move to another job. But nowhere does it address the fact that there is such thing as prevailing conditions on the job market, right? If you're running a business and I open up another business across the street that pays twice what your employees pay, well, that's going to have an effect on your business. You're going to have to pay them more or lose them, right? Obviously, all of the jobs are stitched together in one giant job market, and making sure that job market is as precarious as possible is a highly lucrative enterprise for the capital holders to be engaged in, eh?
Well, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously like the drug laws are also very good for nicotine companies and alcohol companies,
police unions, private prisons. The big pharma. Yeah, the list is endless. Ugh. Yeah. The corruption is thick and palpable and suffocating.
Yeah, we got a lot of problems that I think are more systemic than Elon Musk.
Yeah. Well, this is the whole point, right? This is the whole thing. The entire political establishment, including the Donald administration, is geared towards keeping us talking about anything but the fact that a tiny minority of us are making out with huge tracts of the national wealth. That is the reason for the crazy discourse on Reddit and NPR, and the reason for that that so many sober, formerly credible news outlets emphasize the ineligibility of Donald Trump for the presidency. and why it's such a beautiful thing that people, despite the fact that Donald doesn't have a single policy I agree with, I can definitely see the beauty of the voting populace telling the institutionalized reality definers to F right off. We're going to elect the Donald anyway. It just goes to show how much they have lost control of the discourse, and you just know they're desperate as their viewership numbers continue to collapse in meteoric fashion.
Well, I think ultimately, yeah, you should try to be the change you want to see in the world. And, like, I think what we all need to do, well, with the extensive amount of airtime we've given to Joe Dispenza, like, if you want to improve the life for immigrants or change, like, our crazy system, you got to try to improve, like, who you are as a person. And that will, like, reflect into the world, through some quantum effect. We do call the podcast System Failure, but, I mean, there is just the other side of the coin where we should call it, like, System Success or something, or we should be trying to, like, the key to changing things is to be, like, successful in our own lives, right?
Yeah, the subtext has always existed, right? The idea is that you have to call it something catchy and easy to remember, system failure. But the point is, yes, the system is failing, right? But that is a huge opportunity for personal growth. And it's a huge opportunity for the lower middle classes. I always quote the great ethnobotanist and quasi-philosopher T-Mac when I say that during times of revolution, the cafes are open all night and there's music in the streets.
Yeah.
So you're right. There's more. Like, yes, okay. The idea is, yes, this is supposed to be yes, we are in a context of a systemic collapse, but that should be a cause for great optimism, and that's why I'm always screaming about the Italian Renaissance, which came out of the morass of the late Middle Ages, and also about early Christianity, which came out of the horror of the fall of Rome.
Well, I mean, you say you don't agree with any of the Donald's policies, but I mean, I guess there's some kind of executive order about, like, the Martin Luther King files and JFK and RFK. Did you see about that?
I did not, and I would definitely be in favor of such a thing.
Well, Don Jr. was tweeting. This was going down on Twitter. It's weird because I guess this happened, like, it's like Saturday right now, and this was like on Thursday, and so apparently whatever files there are coming out. It was definitely happened on Twitter. Now, there's no, like, hoopla about it, like, anywhere, which is a little weird. So I don't know how, like, I don't know if they need to, like, find the files or if this is just some kind of Twitter anomaly and I'm never going to, like, hear about this again.
So many of those, aren't there?
But, he also freed the Ross Ulbricht guy there who started the Silk Road. He's been in prison for like 10 years for making this website.
Also, supposedly for hiring a hit on the dark web, but I don't know. I briefly looked into that, and there's a lot of irregularities. The federal agents who busted Ross Ulbricht themselves got busted for stealing his bitcoins. It's like a crazy situation, dude. It's really bizarre. I don't know. Like, this is what happens when you. Like, this is like the power, right, wants to adhere to its monopoly on power, and Ross Ulbricht making this Silk Road where they don't have any control over was, like, not acceptable. So they're going to make an example out of this guy. That's what it felt like to me. Well,
10 years in prison, if you didn't actually murder anyone, is like a long time, man. That's like a lot of your life. Holy smokes.
I also made a list of three different examples of people who got federally convicted for hiring killers, and they get a couple of years maybe. It's not like something where you'd get 10, 20. Ross got 2 life sentences, right? Isn't that what it was?
Yeah, like plus 40 years.
Plus 40 years. Woo!
So, I don't know. I guess we'll see how it shakes out. But those are some exciting developments. I guess other people are really excited about this Ross Ulbricht business. And it's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about. But I don't know. It's a big deal to, like, some libertarian folks, I guess.
Yeah, so. I mean, look, he does seem like, at first blush to me, like a political prisoner. I'm open to arguments to the contrary, but that is the impression that I have of this Ross Ulbricht. It's like Snowden and Chelsea Manning, who, by the way, I guess the Donald declined to pardon Snowden, which is unfortunate. But you're right. I spoke too quickly. There's not that the Donald's going to only do bad things, right? I got swept up in black and white thinking, which is what people are doing on Reddit. Obviously, there's some things he does that I approve of course.
Well, I just the only real. I mean, it is funny that like we have a new president now. Yeah, it's like not Joe Biden anymore. We don't have to listen to this geriatric guy stumble over his words, and I guess that kind of gives me some hope in some ways. But really, now that Donald's in charge, there's like no difference except. Well, there is a sign in front of Gino's over here about, I don't know, bash the fash or something. And so they're obviously concerned about the Nazis over there. But I don't know, really, like, I would just try to not freak out based on, like, what you see online.
Yeah.
And, if something starts actually happening in, like, Meat World, I'll be concerned. A lot of people seem very, very concerned, as from the people I talk to, I guess. And
they're looking at soap like the New York Times, right? The most soberest of publications, telling them that an unacceptable person again is rising to power in DC. And so I guess we must understand why they think that way. But boy, oh boy, the layers of propaganda are thick. And we just have to be aware that that's the context which unfortunately we're going to be living.
Well, I guess just what I was seeing on like NPR is it doesn't seem like there's that much hoopla about like a Nazi being in the White House again. Like surprisingly little, given the amount of outcry on Reddit. And they're just not really. They don't seem to be running the same playbook so much there. So.
That's very encouraging. Maybe NPR learned their lesson after the weapons of mass destruction fiasco and the 2016 election fiasco. Their numbers must have collapsed. I'll never turn on NPR anymore. They must have seen. I know, obviously, for like MSNBC, which is now now going away, that they just lost all their viewers, and CNN, like all their just a couple 10,000 people, and that's it. No one watches anymore. They used to get millions and millions of viewers every day. So it's been wild to behold.
Well, anyway, yeah, I'm just not going to engage with any of that nonsense anymore. And yeah, no more crazy. It's got to be the end of Reddit. And I'll worry about things when they happen in the real world. So.
My retirement. Okay, so one other spicy meatball came rolling down out the chute today, or this week, I should say. And that was the interview by Mr. Tucker Carlson of the OpenAI whistleblower. Now, I'm given to understand, Brian, that you haven't had the pleasure, or should I say the displeasure, of sitting through that podcast.
No, what's going on with the AI? Yeah. Like, what whistles are being blown here?
Well, so obviously the guy that got killed is the son of the man who is no longer alive, died a couple days before his 26th birthday back in November. They found him dead in his apartment. His mom is an immigrant from India, and she speaks with a very thick Hindi accent on the podcast. So it's hard to always understand what she's saying. But the woman had a really good command of vocabulary. She just had the way that she used English was really, really good. I just couldn't always understand the words that she was trying to make. And Tucker doesn't help with by injecting commercials into these really horrifying descriptions. But yeah, this podcast made me queasy. So just a word for the wise: this is not one to listen to if you don't like to hear about horrifying gore. So what happened is this kid was like a genius. He's one of these guys that's going to the math Olympiad and winning the whole thing nationally. He's going to like China to engage in programming competitions. The dude was like a prodigy. And he was obviously, as mentioned, just about to turn 26. He had been working for OpenAI. He had voiced concerns about the fact that OpenAI was scooping up all of this data on the internet that is copyrighted. As long as OpenAI is a non-profit company, he felt fine about scooping up all this data off the internet. But as soon as it transitioned to a for-profit, which you may recall happened late 2022, early 23, not sure when that happened, Brian. I think that was late 22. This guy started to have a real ethical problem with what he was doing at OpenAI. So he resigned his position, and he was about to start this. I guess he had interviews. He resigned his position in November of 24, so just a couple weeks ago. And then on November the 26th, he went to Catalina Island off Los Angeles with his buddies, went on vacation, returned home to his San Francisco apartment shortly thereafter on a Sunday evening. I think, I believe that Sunday the 22nd was a Sunday. And he went to his apartment. He had some cursory interactions with the other people in the apartment complex. And then his mom talked to his dad and went to bed. His mom tries to call him the next day. No answer. His phone rings once and goes to voicemail after one ring. And after a couple, 3 days, his parents start to get concerned. And they start contacting the authorities and start showing up at this apartment. So now we're 5-6 days, after the 22nd, late November. And they're there with the police, and like two police they finally get the key from the apartment manager, and they can open the door. This is like a really nice apartment complex with like security and cameras, according to the description. And the police open the door, and two cops come out, and they tell this woman, all right, well, so we just have to wait for 2 more officers to get here. And then 2 more officers arrive, and that happens again. And then finally the woman's like, yeah, look, we really can't wait anymore. They're not telling her son is dead. They're all in there looking at this body. And they're not telling her son is dead. And she said she realized her son died when not an ambulance, but a white panel van pulled up when they pulled a stretcher out the back. And that's how she knew, okay, that's my son in there, and he's dead. Very strange. The coroner officially ruled cause of death a suicide from a single gunshot wound, severing the brainstem. And the body, the situation at the funeral home was so bizarre that the family ordered a second autopsy from an independent doctor that revealed a far different cause of death. So again, the official cause of death of this man is supposed to be a gunshot wound, a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the brainstem, but it turns out that the gunshot wound came from an angle above and behind his head, missed his brain entirely, and cleared his eyes off of his face. And that's the reality. And so he was still alive, but likely unconscious after the gunshot wound. The apartment itself is a bloody mess. I mean, there was they shot this dude, and then there was a struggle, him with a bloody face and no eyes, struggling against these people or person, who the hell knows. And there's blood all up in the bathroom and everywhere. And the kid, clearly, according to the coroner's report, the gun, the second, not the coroner, but the second independent autopsy showed the bullet hadn't even hit his brain, and the dude died over a long period of time, very painfully and horribly. The woman on the podcast read all this, and she did spoke of all this, and she did a pretty good job keeping the emotion out of her voice. I was like, dang, I was horrified, and I don't even know this person. I mean, the fact that this is his mom and that the kid was only 25, about to turn 26, is just really bizarre. But at all levels, these people are getting sandbagged by law enforcement. Something has its tentacles in the San Francisco area law enforcement. There are various arms of law enforcement there in the Bay Area, because these people can't seem to get any kind of official explanation or help. They just get this odd the official police investigation leaves out all this evidence. There is a hair from a wig that got caught in the hinge of the door on the way out the apartment. Now, someone was wearing a wig, not the kid, right? Someone was wearing a wig, and that wig caught in the door as the person was passing by, and there's a few tufts of wig hair that have been recovered from the scene, right? And clearly the cause of death doesn't match the official coroner's report at all. And so, as Tucker, it's a short podcast, only about an hour long, and after all these grisly details, you're just left to wonder what kind of a country we really live in. Obviously, we had a couple of Boeing whistleblowers meet early graves in 2024 after the storied incidents of that company. And I also think of that Cosmos TV show with the black science man, Neil deGrasse Tyson, from 2013 or 14, whenever they did a redux of the Cosmos that had Carl Sagan in it. And in that Cosmos, they talk about the tetraethyl lead additives that polluted America in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. And how that caused a measurable drop in IQ across our country, and how the scientists who discovered that these lead additives in our fuel was being burnt into the atmosphere and then lead poisoning the entire population. Well, that dude had his lab smashed and his family intimidated by thugs from the oil companies who didn't want to have their clever money-making oil distribution scheme disrupted by removing the tetraethyl lead additives, which we did. You can only buy unleaded gas to this day. But it really goes to show you that what America is advertised as and what it really is are two totally separate things. So I encourage all you system failure listeners out there to click over to Tucker Carlson's pod and just give that one a listen. I think there's only one shameful ad break. A woman's describing her heartbreaking situation, and then they're going to, add you and subscribe to you some NordVPN or something like that. There's only one Craven ad break, so check it out.
So he whistleblew that OpenAI was using copyrighted material in their...
Yeah. Yes, I forgot that little bit. Not only that, but he was the news organization he was whistleblowing to is the New York Times, who had classified him, unbeknownst to his parents, only a few days before as a protected witness, giving him all kinds of legal options. Now the New York Times wants nothing to do with the story and won't talk to the parents. So, wow, it's really crazy, dude. And really crazy.
Was there like security footage from the apartment?
There are 3 possible entrances to the man's apartment. One has a camera, 2 do not. The one that has a camera, the CCTV, the closed circuit TV, shows no one coming or going from the kid's apartment during any of the days in question. But as mentioned, there are also 2 service entrances or fire entrances or exits or something, 2 other means of entrance and exit that did not have cameras on them.
Wow. Well, I just don't is there any repercussion to OpenAI for using copyrighted material then?
None.
I mean, people seem to know now. I don't know. It's crazy.
I think OpenAI is one to resort to murder most foul to make sure there are no repercussions for what they're doing.
Well, it's all hard to fathom.
Yeah, it's really, really crazy.
It's so weird. Yeah, people. I mean, that kind of thing happens a lot, right? I mean, obviously, people get killed, and I feel like, why is it such a protected asset? Like who? I don't know. Who cares that much about copyrighted material? What's going on there?
I think once you get over a certain dollar amount, you get to sell your soul to the devil money. And I don't think it's that much, 10, 15, 20. If people are desperate, if people need money, they'll do anything to get that money. And these companies, they have to show a profit increase quarter after quarter after quarter, right? OpenAI's for-profit status tells us everything we need to know about the psychopathic way or the sociopathic way that it must conduct business in order to be consistent with fiduciary responsibilities.
I mean, I guess San Francisco is like the worst possible place to be like a whistleblower about a tech company. Just because, I mean, obviously it's just tech is such a big thing out there, and
tech is how they're going to find out you're a whistleblower and how they're going to get you, huh?
Yeah, they're going to have, I guess, buy off the coroner and whatnot. Well, I guess it's unfortunate that, I mean, I saw that podcast on Tucker, and then I just didn't really, I was like, I don't know, so that sounds like some crazy thing. It sounds like it should be a bigger story than it is. And
it's like Seth Rich, remember that dude?
Yeah, the DNC whistleblower guy.
Yeah, the DNC staffer who almost certainly is the one that handed over all those DNC emails to WikiLeaks. Was just walking back to his apartment in suburban DC, and just got randomly killed, but no one took any of his wallet or cell phone or anything. He had just snuffed out, and that's it. And we're just not going to ask questions about it and move on.
Well, I mean, the WikiLeaks thing is had huge ramifications, and it seems like led to Hillary losing in 2016 and all kinds of stuff. So that adds up. It's just crazy that I guess AI is must be pretty big game, I guess, and I guess obviously it is. It's gonna have a huge impact on our culture, but what is I mean, there's several AI companies, and I don't know, just getting copyrighted material, it just seems like relatively small potatoes. I don't know how you would stop these AI things from gathering. I mean, getting copyrighted material on the internet. It's still gonna sweep it up, and it's
Yeah. I mean, even if you made it illegal, like you're saying, how would you enforce it? It's a lot. But I do think that whoever masters this AI thing, whatever company, whatever faction gets it first, rules the world. It's a huge, big deal, historically speaking. It couldn't be a bigger deal. There is no bigger deal than this in all of history, as far as I can see, in terms of the potential for controlling, for acquiring and controlling resources. It's virtually infinite. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and my mind, sometimes I feel like AI is a huge deal. I'll be using AI, and yeah, I mean, I'm like, this is awesome, this is the future. But then sometimes AI, you just feel its limitations, and it's like, well, this is just a glorified Google search. And how much is this really going to affect meat reality? But yeah, probably like a lot at some point here. So
it's like an army of employees. If you perfect it, it's an army of employees that will do whatever you say, at least in digital space. That's a monster. It's like the grand prize of all of history, right? That's what we're pursuing here. So yeah. I think that it's going to be really interesting to see what history looks like 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
Well, there are just these huge question marks about the future, I guess, like with the AI, and then, there was all these lights in the sky, and like, I don't know, what happened to that, man?
We're on to the next thing, huh? I am sure we've not seen the last of the lights in the sky, but it really seemed crazy that that was all going on in the lead up to the election. It sure is an interesting time to be alive. I'm sure I've commented that any number of times on this podcasting.
Yes. All right.
Well, with that, I will exhort our patient listeners to make their way over to systemfailure.org, our new domain name, and there you can read the weekly essay roll of exciting system failure content. These essays come out every single Monday, and if you are so inclined, you can enter your email into systemfailure.org and sign up to receive those newsletters directly in your email inbox as an email, and that way you shan't have to worry about ever missing one. And furthermore, if you're interested in getting in touch with either myself or with Brian, you can accomplish that feat as well at systemfailure.org. Again, that's systemfailure.org. Well, alrighty, folks, I'll be back on Thursday with your weekly essay read, and Brian and I will be back 1 week from today with your regularly scheduled System Failure podcast. I wish you all a pleasant week.
All right, see you, folks.